Good morning, everybody. I knew how to push the button, so the mic came on. All right. Yeah, starting off well. Talking about Irish people don't get tans. Is that what you said? Huh. Well, I've got British Isles in me, but only about 30% or so, or 40%. So, yeah, I'm not either. So, I guess it's the Jewish side of me that tans. Huh? Yeah, Jewish side tans. The English side left England in the 1700s, and then the background is a lot of horse thieves and polygamists and rowdies and scoundrels and stuff like that. Yeah. Oh, get along with them real well. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. All right. We are continuing in our study of the Ten Commandments. Go to Exodus chapter 20. Now, how many of you have had a little one in your life or have one now who does not like to take a nap? Right? Okay. So my grandson, when he was 4, he's older than that now, but napping was not on his list of things that need to be accomplished before the day was over. Okay. It just wasn't happening for him. And you know they need rest, and hopefully if they go down, you can go down for a little snooze, right? And if you can just get him quiet for about 2 minutes, Barbara's oldest when he was young, he would keep wiggling a foot. And as long as he wiggled a foot, he would stay awake. And she would have to pin him to the bed. If she could just get him quiet for maybe 20 seconds, he'd drop off. But he'd stay awake, and that foot would go and go and go. And then they take a nap, and then they wake up. They're full of energy, but they're not cranky because they get cranky when they haven't had enough sleep. I get cranky when I haven't had enough sleep. Okay. So, yeah, there you go. Anybody eating themselves? He sings. He sings to kids. Then it puts them to sleep. Right. Now, a lot of young ones don't like to rest. Old people don't like to rest either. Adults, if you will. But there comes a time in your life like mine now when you look forward to going to bed. But I've got to that age where just because I went to bed doesn't mean I sleep well. Okay, it was up a couple times last night. Yeah. Mostly we don't fully grasp the rhythm that's taking place in our minds and our bodies, the way we've been created. We don't understand that God has created us to go down for intervals. We stay up too late, we get up too early, and think we can go on coffee. For a while. It doesn't always work. We need to take a break from ordinary life that we chase throughout most of the week. And that's what we're talking about today, to remember the Sabbath. And it's because we don't completely comprehend the way God has created us that most people don't give a lot of thought to this fourth instruction, this fourth statement to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Most people I talk to, they ignore it, or they get overly religious about it, or they don't think it's important enough to give any sort of consideration. But this commandment is really very simple. There's an exquisite blessing that's involved in it. And once you understand it, you can recognize there's a real life-changing scene that God is introducing to his people here. If we take God at his word, which most of us do on a hit-and-miss basis, right? Admit that. I like this one, I'll do it. I don't like that one, I'll ignore it, and God will forgive me. It catches up to you. This is really a relevant thing for us to understand in our life. So you are in Exodus chapter 20, and I am moving there. We'll start reading in verse 8. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them, but on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. The word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew, which means to rest or to cease from work. And we can look at another verse that helps explain this a little bit further in Exodus 31:17. It says, "It is a permanent sign of my covenant with the people of Israel. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and earth, but on the seventh day he stopped working and was refreshed." Now the word refreshed also means to take a breath. So we have a picture of God creating the heavens and earth, and then on the seventh day he goes, Now, did God really need to take a breath because he was wore out? No. He knew we were going to need to take a breath because we get wore out. And so in imitation of him, he says, take this day. I like the way it reads in the Message version. It says, because in 6 days God made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he stopped and took a long, deep breath. So Peterson brings out that nuance from the Hebrew. It's the breath of work well done. So why is this commandment still important for us today? Well, some people say, well, that's the Old Testament. That's the law. Okay, so explain to me, if you don't want to obey that one, tell me another one of the 10 commandments you're willing to throw out too. Because if you can throw out one, you can throw out them all, right? How about adultery? That just shouldn't count today. Right? We're free in Christ. I can sleep with whoever I want. It's what we do, but I don't get any amens because you're on Facebook. You don't want anybody to see you doing it, right? How about murder? How about perjury? Okay, see? All right. So maybe there's something in this, taking this day, that we can learn from. You think maybe? I've got, I don't know, hour and a half to teach you because I don't have to be anywhere today, so this is really cool. I'm kidding. So let's look at a few of these. Write down number one, the first blessing of a Sabbath rest. You can say that. Write it down. First blessing of a Sabbath rest is it elevates people. Elevates people. It lifts them up. How does this commandment elevate people? Now, for most of our existence upon this planet, life consisted primarily of work. And up until the middle of the 1700s, where we start the Industrial Revolution and people lived in cities and they went to factories, 95% or more of the people were involved in agriculture. Farming, animals, food production, farming for the making of clothes, the making of implements, okay? All this was done off of the land. People then, and for years have really been little more than beasts of burden, working every chance they had in order to survive. Way back when, in fact, I've met people who did not go to the stove and turn it on. They lit the stove with wood. Most of these people have passed on. I remember talking to a man in Arkansas, and I said, and I knew that he grew up in a house with a wood-burning, pot-bellied stove. That's what you heated your water on. And it was July. You know how it is, right? It's 95 degrees, and humidity is about 1,200, you know, okay? You can look out there, and you just know I don't want to go out there. I'll sweat thinking about it. And I said something to him making light, and I said, wow, it must have been really difficult back in July when you were growing up, you know, in these houses without air conditioning and lighting a stove. He says, no, on Sundays we had cornbread and milk, and we were grateful for that. And I thought, I had just got schooled by a man whose grace and gratitude taught me a lesson. They took that day off. So actually in 1908, there was a New England mill became the first factory to give Saturday and Sundays off. So everybody was working, but the Jews didn't want to work on Saturday because that was their Sabbath, because the Christians were already taking off Sunday because that was their day. So the mill said, okay, you don't have to work on Saturday then. And it was the first time it became a 5-day work week, was in 1908. When the Depression came in, they kept that going because it was easier to employ people in a 5-day work week than it was a 6-day work week. So that's how we get the 5-day work week. But long before the Industrial Revolution came in and brought in less hours, the Ten Commandments came into effect and actually brought in less hours. It gave us a day of rest. Because it never really occurred to people before then to stop working. Work, 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 work. Life is hard. Keep going, keep going, keep going. For a woman before electricity and before all the modern conveniences we've had, most of her day was spent preparing and cooking food. When breakfast was over, she's working on lunch. When lunch was over, she's working on dinner. In between, she's taking care of kids and spinning yarn to make socks. And you think you're tired, right? Yeah. So it actually took faith in God to stop working 1 day a week and believe there would still be enough to eat. And God had already showed them this. Because when they gave them the manna, he gave them the instructions before the Ten Commandments. Don't go out on that day. There won't be any. I'm going to give you double the amount the day before. But you can't keep any of it until see, God's doing a miracle here. If you kept it on Monday night, it was full of maggots on Tuesday. If you kept it Tuesday night, it's full of maggots on Wednesday. Don't save any of it. Consume all of it. However, come Friday to Saturday, you can keep it over that day. That's the miracle. But when they went out, there was nothing on that day. We'll see that in a moment. So God had already set up a day of rest for them before he gets to the Ten Commandments. The cool thing is that 2 Peter 1:5 says, by his divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. If we'll just obey God and not go out the next day when he told us not to go out, we'll be okay. You can take a day off, and God's going to provide. He also told them to take a 7th year off, which they didn't do. Can we take a whole year off? Yes, you can. Because the 6th year is going to provide for the 7th, and actually then you'll plant in the 8th year and eat in the 9th. So there's 3 years God was going to provide for them. They didn't have enough faith to do it. Pardon me? I don't know. Tell me next week. Look it up. Cool. So don't doubt that a day of rest was created by God for us to live a godly life. All right, so that's the first thing. It elevates us. The second blessing of a Sabbath rest is that it reminds us we are free. I think I alluded to this last week. Now, I believe the people that Moses was with were better equipped to understand this point than we are today. Because for centuries, they'd been slaves. And slaves get a day off when the owner says they can, which is not very often. Because the whole purpose of having slaves is so you don't have to work and you make more money. Slaves don't have Sabbaths. And so according to the Bible, unless it's necessary for survival, people who choose to work 7 days a week are also slaves. Slaves work for money or so, but they're still slaves. So the millionaire that works 7 days a week, he's still a slave. He's just a slave to his money. The Sabbath commandment not only elevated people from slavery, it reminded them that they were free, and it gave them a sense of dignity because they can enjoy the luxury of a day off without any demands. Well, there was one demand. I take that back. The demand was that they must make a holy day holy by their rest. They worshiped God by resting. Ooh. Now, most of the time when you think about worship, you think about coming in here and you're listening to music or you're watching the screen. Oh, that's worship. Scripture says you worship God when you rest. I can think of 1,000 ways of worshiping God that does not include music. How I speak to my neighbor, I worship God by that. That's holy. How I'm honest with the way I work at Woods, that's worship. How when I'm told to clean something, I do it to the best of my ability, and I don't just hurry it up so that I can get back to something else like watching cat videos on my phone. All right? How I do what I've been asked to do and do it well is an act of worship. Here God says, rest, and you'll honor me. Interesting. That goes against everything our religious minds are taught, right? I mean, we're so used to thinking that we make something holy by our efforts or our deeds or our spiritual gifts. We've got to be involved. We've got to invest. And so this commandment, it goes against all this logic because it insists we make a day holy by resting. And how does it make it holy? We take a Sabbath rest because God took a rest after he created the heavens and his earth. And when we rest in proper fashion, we're imitating God. Now, if we can't take one day a week, and I'll give you some examples here in a second, one day a week and rest and do something different, we're going to enter into a kind of a blasphemy. That's where we're telling God it's not really, he didn't really mean what he meant. And so what we're saying is that, it was good for God to rest, but we don't need to. We're above all that. If we can't take a rest, then we're saying we're indispensable. Sure, the creator of the universe can take a day of rest, but if I take a day of rest, everything's going to fall apart. So we put ourselves above God. I don't really want to go there. Okay. If we have to work 7 days a week, it shows a lack of trust in God. I would not, when Barbara and I were first married, we made $90 a month extra after basic bills. Some of you have been there. Okay. Which meant we didn't have cable TV. Couldn't spend 60 of that on a television set. And we were married, 4 or 5 months before I very timidly went over and turned on the window unit air conditioner because I wasn't sure we could make the electric bill. But I was not going to work 7 days a week. I'm going to budget according to my faith in God. So part of it's faith, but also part of it's wisdom. Could I have made more money working an extra day? Yes, but at the expense of my family, it wasn't worth it. J. Ellsworth Callis, on the other side of this, he says, I sometimes think the Sabbath commandment wasn't more than a week old before someone began trying to define its boundaries. And this is what else we're good at. It says rest. Well, what does rest mean? Now we need a list of rest. Now we need a list of things we can't do. Instead of just taking the spirit of rest, we need rules. So by the time Jesus comes along, there are 1,521 things a person could not do on the Sabbath because it might look like work. You want some ridiculous examples? Okay. How many knows what a tailor is? Right? Not Taylor Drake, a tailor. Right? Person that sews. Okay. So if a tailor happened to put a needle in his lapel because he forgot it's there, it's easy, and he was walking on the Sabbath, he was working. And the Pharisees would get on his case. You can't carry your burden. Who thinks of these things? It's like they got way too much time on their hands to come up with rules. They keep everybody. Anyway, that was one. What was another one here? Oh, you could dip a radish in salt or salt water, but you couldn't hold it there too long because it might start to pickle, and then you're pickling a radish, and that's work. Give you another one, okay? So you've got a basin of water, and it's a Sabbath, and you're washing your hands, and they didn't have plumbing, so where are you going to take this water? You're going to throw it outside out the window. Why does it work? Nope. No, you got to be stupider than that. You got to be more ridiculous than that. Close to it. What if it hits a seed and the seed starts to grow? See, because of all these laws, that's why the Pharisees were trying to trick Jesus on the Sabbath. You can't heal on the Sabbath. Yes, I can. Okay. Yeah. So, In Mark 2, it tells of Jesus and the disciples. They're walking through a field, and as they're walking through the field, they're hungry. So they're picking grains off the wheat. Now, they were allowed to do that. You go back into the Old Testament, and it told the farmers, leave the edges of your fields or your corners. Don't harvest to the edges so that the poor can come by and they can harvest it. And he noticed the poor were still working for their meal. Today, we hand them a card and we say, go to Walmart. You may be poor, but you're still working for dinner. They're not harvesting for you. So the law said, leave a corner. The law said, leave an edge. What if the edge was just one stalk at a time? They were obeying the law, but the spirit was feed the poor. No, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I was thinking about that today. Okay. So the Pharisee protested, and they said, you're harvesting on the Sabbath. This is what Jesus says. The Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, and not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. The Sabbath is there for us. We're not there for the Sabbath. Okay. Today, we've kind of gone almost in the opposite direction. When I grew up in Southern California, and this is going to sound weird to you, but I grew up in the 60s and 70s, we did not have any sports practices on Wednesday or Sunday, nor did we have games scheduled Wednesdays and Sundays. I never missed a youth group because of a sports event, because those were church nights. Back then, it was a more conservative state. Reagan was the governor when I was growing up. I've had people miss church because somebody in their family was playing football on a Sunday. How many remember when Walmart was closed on Sundays? Anybody remember that? Guy could be a little bit older to remember Walmart closed on Sundays. Yeah. Even in Southern California, I remember we were living in San Diego. My grandparents lived in Los Angeles, and that's about 160 miles. And my dad would fill up the car on the night before, because when we drove back on Sunday, it was hard to find gas stations that were open. Now they're 24/7. Yeah. Thinking ahead. So now that we're a free people, we need to pause and ask what the Sabbath is all about. And to find that answer, we're going to go back again, of course, to Genesis. We've already listed that, where God made the heavens and the earth, and then he rested. But it wasn't because he was exhausted, but because he was fulfilled. He was joyful. He created everything, and then he said, oh, this is good. This is good. And then he created man and woman, and he goes, oh, this is very good. So the Sabbath is a celebration of tasks well done. It's stepping back from something you've done and you've gone, that's good. If you're into furniture making, you'll step back when it's finished and you'll go, I like that. If you sew or you quilt, when it's over, you go, it's that sigh of satisfaction. You've all had that with something you've done, and it's finished. There's nothing else to do. This is good. It's joy. Very good. There's another side of the issue. Sometimes our work lacks a satisfaction because we haven't rested as we should. There are people come into Woods on Monday, and they're exhausted from their weekend, and now they're out of sync. They haven't rested. Okay. I think it was Charles Swindoll that says we become the type of society that worships its work, works at its play, and plays at its worship. Worships its work, works at its play, and plays at its worship. You know how many people come into church on Sunday exhausted from Saturday night? Other people have trouble resting because they have done they know that it's not their best work. I try to go to bed at night knowing that I sleep well. Have you done everything you need to? I'm going to sleep well tonight. What does that mean? Because my conscience is clear. Is your conscience clear regarding the work you've done during the day? You rest better that way. So when we let the Sabbath be the Sabbath, no matter which day of the week that works for us, then it's not so much that we keep the Sabbath, but the Sabbath is now keeping me. Let me answer your question here. I think I've got it coming up, but I don't remember. Is Sunday a work day for me? No, I'm going to come to it. I know where it's at now. Never mind. Sorry. I'll get there. Point number 3. What does the Sabbath do? What's the blessing of the Sabbath? It actually helps abolish slavery. And you're kind of going, say what? I said, I didn't get this either until I started to study it. Why didn't the Bible just outright abolish slavery like it wanted to abolish murder or incest? Slavery in biblical times was different than what we recognize as slavery in the 21st century. Okay. So we look back at the early parts of America, and we've got ships going over to the coast of Africa, and they're picking up slaves. Well, the black people they were picking up were enslaved by other black people. Okay? We weren't going into the inner regions of Nigeria. Nigerians were going into the inner regions of Nigeria and capturing people and selling them. Okay? Slavery's always been around. Read an article recently that said slavery started with white people. Hello, the Egyptians aren't white. Okay? Right? They're in northern Africa. Okay, hello, let's get our history straight. Most of the time when there were slaves, and you can read about this in the first 5 books, they were captured a lot of times in war. You're going to come at me with all your people, then I'm coming back at you, and since we won the war, I can get the spoils from the war. If a man were to capture a woman, ooh, I know what I'm going to do with her tonight. God says, no, you can't. You got to wait 30 days. Really? Yeah. You got to shave her head, too. Ooh. If I've got to wait 30 days and she's bald, maybe she's not as attractive to me in 30 days. As God's going, that's right. So what he did is he saved the dignity of the females by not allowing them to be raped just because he was lustful. That's Old Testament law. It raised the dignity because you were created in the image of God. I cannot degrade it. That's Old Testament. Isn't that cool? A lot of stuff like that. Okay. One Old Testament passage says that a father cannot kill his son for any reason. Why? Because that's what they did in the old days. I don't like you, you misbehave, pop you off, make another one. I don't care. Okay? All right. It's what they did in Egypt. Okay? That's why that's why that plague was a sacrifice, because they'd sacrifice their firstborn. So now they're going into the land of Canaan, and God says when you get in there, you can't kill your kids just because you want to. Why? Because that's what they were doing in the land of Canaan. That's what they were doing. God says, you don't like your son, you can't kill him. What do you have to do? You have to take him to the elders. And then you've got to plead your case to the elders. What's that mean? It means there's a whole bunch of people who have wiser and cooler heads to see whether or not he deserves to die. You can't do it. The dignity of the child is now raised in a way they've never been before. And there is no record ever of the elders saying the child needs to die. Never happened. This was leagues ahead of its time. When you get into and you start to understand the context of what's taking place in the Old Testament, you're like, God is so cool. The other nations are degrading their women. You're not allowed to. You're my chosen people. And that same concept of dignity that starts in the Old Testament works its way into the New Testament, which is why Jesus taught was so kind to people, men and women caught in adultery. Wow. Cool stuff. So, slaves in the Bible were often captured in war, and it wasn't a racist thing. Now, sometimes they would capture somebody, and they're like, you know what? I'm doing better in this Jewish household than I was starving over in my other country. So now I have to be released every 7 years. God says you can't keep them forever. nah, I got a good thing going here. So I'm going to put my ear up against the doorpost, and you're going to put a hole in it. And that's going to say, I want to serve you forever because you take care of me, you take care of my kids, you take care of my family. I'm eating, I'm free, I have dignity, you listen to me, and I get a day off. At the same time, the Bible understands there's going to be various forms of slavery that take place. The worst form, some of the worst forms being what we had recently in our history of the world. So the Bible actually never condones slavery, but it understands that it takes place. It gives us a spiritual basis for understanding a person's worth. And when we understood that it applied not just to the Jews, but to everybody, God knew that slavery to the Christian heart, to the true Jewish heart, would work its way out of society. And that's exactly what it did. So we can condemn America for having slavery, or you can bless America for stopping it. So it's not where you started, it's where you ended up. Okay? A lot of people want to condemn America because it has slaves. I think America's beautiful because he stopped slave trades way before other countries. Okay? Everybody here does not want to be judged on who you were. You want to be accepted for who you've become. That's the difference. That's what America has become. We've become a place that no longer allows that type of abuse. So by definition, a slave owner was under no obligation to ever have to allow a slave to rest. That's what the Israelites remembered in Egypt. But the fourth commandment gives slaves a right to give you, your son, your daughter, your men servants, your maid servants, your foreigners, all get a day off. It's never happened before. They were slaves, and now they're reminded not to enslave anybody else. So the Ten Commandments, there was really a far-reaching document that sees the value and worth of every person on earth, regardless of their social, economic, or political status. You are a man, you are a woman created in the image of God. You have my dignity. I will treat you as such. I'll treat you as a daughter of God. I will treat you as a son of God. I choose to. It's always a choice. But as I understand Scripture, that's where he's leading us in the Ten Commandments. Pardon? Yeah. Well, Scripture doesn't ask me if I want to be. I wanted to be a disciple of Christ. These are the rules. I don't have to be. But if you're a disciple, there's not a plan B. Okay. That's good. The Sabbath, what else does it do? It strengthens the family unit. It strengthens family relationships. When a workaholic takes a work day off, usually, they'll spend it with their family and their friends. The Sabbath has a good effect upon marriages, too. Because if you've ever been married to a workaholic, you know what it's like when they finally take a day off. Some people don't take work. Some workaholics go on vacation and still work. Okay, I get that. I've been on vacation in California, and my church has called me, usually because of a death. The one I remember the most was this person died, will you do the funeral? Okay, so I'm still on, even on vacation. The third point was that the Sabbath helps to eliminate slavery, and this includes those who have become slaves to their jobs. And like I said, our work follows us everywhere. So if you have a work phone, when you get into your car, it syncs to the car now. And wherever you go, there's your job. I think maybe some people need to learn to take a Sabbath from their electronic devices. I have a guy I listen to on the radio. His name's Dennis Prager, and on his Sabbath, he's Jewish. He's a conservative Jewish host, and he turns off his electronics on the Sabbath. Doesn't watch TV, doesn't read the news. This is my day to be with family, and we eat, and we have games, and we talk, and it's a different day. The day is completely different from the rest of his week. Some families, maybe they need to turn off the TV because the TV's on Monday through Saturday. Maybe Sunday it needs to be off. Okay. My TV comes on Sunday because I don't watch TV during the week. I don't get any TV. I have DVDs. I've got a TV. I watch DVDs. I don't subscribe to anything. Nothing. I don't subscribe to Netflix. I don't do $5 to Spotify. I don't do anything. I don't pay for anything. It's not free. I don't need it. Okay, I'd rather spend my money elsewhere. It's just me. Jeremiah and Ezekiel both lamented over the fact their people had come to treat the Sabbath like any other day. So for centuries, Jewish leaders have often taught that the Sabbath is a celebration. Worship is linked with rest and rejoicing, and holiness is linked to wholeness, completeness. After worship should come celebration, the Jews taught. After you've worshiped on the Sabbath, now we celebrate. That one of their books called the Talmud is just huge. It says, devote part of the Sabbath to Torah, which is the study of the Jewish law, and part to feasting. We're going to eat well. One rabbi said, sleep on the Sabbath is a pleasure. Yeah, I like that. Why? Because I can't nap when I'm at Woods from 7:30 to 5:30. Mark Franz on it. I don't know why. Allow the Sabbath to be a day when you focus on friends and family. Let it be a day that breaks up the routine of the rest of the week. Answer your question here. How many have heard of the statement, we're going to put on our Sunday best? Okay, why? Because Monday through Saturday in this country, the farmers were working and had on their farm clothes. And one of the reasons Sunday at 11 became the day when church mostly started was because it was a perfect time between the morning chores and the afternoon chores. How many of you know just because you go into church on Sunday, Bessie still wants to be milked? Okay? So you had basic things that they still had to do. They still had to eat. They still may have to draw water for themselves and their animals, but they're not harvesting. They're not planting. They're not doing 12-hour days, sun up to sundown. It's a different day. Okay? So the Sunday best was, I'm not wearing my farm clothes to church. I'm going to set this set of clothes aside. I'm going to wear that on Sunday. I'm going to look a little better. I don't wear this on Sunday. I don't wear a shirt that says words on Sunday at my church. I wear a nicer shirt. I don't wear my work jeans. I got Levi's that are set aside just for Sunday, and then I've got others in a drawer that are set aside to go to work. They've got the paint stains on them and the tears and what's that. Okay, this is different, so it's a different day. Do I not consider Sunday a work day for me? Because I have worked Monday to Saturday to prepare my teaching. When I get to church, it's not like going to Woods. I get to fellowship with people and talk about God for a long time. I can't sit around a table and talk about God at Woods. Again, Mark frowns on it. Right? And as well he should. He didn't hire me to talk about God. He hired me to talk about paint and plumbing and toilets. And he pays me well to do that. So come Sunday, it's different for me. I have on different clothes. I have a different conversation. I'm at a different place. Okay? I go out to eat on Sunday. I'm invited to eat. My church is really good. They've invited me to eat, and in the last 3 years, I think one time I actually paid for my own meal. Somebody pays for my meal. Isn't that cool? But I don't eat out during the week. It's too expensive. I went into Subway the other day after it opened. It was like $14 for a sandwich. Like, are you kidding? I can spend $14 on a steak and grill it at the house. You know? That's right. I don't eat out much at all. Very rarely. Can you afford it? Yeah. No, because my cooking's better than Brahms. I remember cooking an anniversary meal for Barb, and we did steak and salmon, and the salmon was done on a cedar plank, and I'm going to make I ain't done yet. You're going to really be drooling when I get to it. It's done on a cedar plank, and I had taken real butter and melted it and added lemon juice and fresh dill. And that went on the salmon, and then I put that on the grill. And then we had shared a steak, and then we had taken some broccoli. And if you've never eaten broccoli this way, oh, man. You cut the little florets, and you make them a little smaller, okay? And you get them all in a bowl, and you pour olive oil on them, and you do cracked salt and pepper. And then you put them on a cookie sheet and you broil it just to where it's starting to darken. You're brown and black, and you pull it off, you put it back in the bowl, and you put fresh lemon juice on top. And you'll eat it like candy. If you don't like broccoli, you will like this, okay? And we're sitting there, and I don't know what we've got. Barbara and I together, we probably got, $15 or $20 in the meal. But the steaks were so big, we had to eat them the next night. So I got 2 meals out of it. And she looks and she goes, this is why we don't go out. I didn't have to tip the waiter. I got a kiss from my wife. I got 2 kisses. Been a while. I was talking to my worship leader on the First Friday. I went to First Friday, and he came over and I gave her a hug. I walked across the room because I knew I'd get a hug, and she said, "You should get a T-shirt that says we'll travel for hugs." And I said, "Okay, but the back has to say I will speed for kisses." Okay, I'm way off my notes. Where were we at anyway? Oh, yeah, strengthening family relationships. How many of you know spending some time with your family and cooking and enjoying a good meal strengthens the family? Yeah. So Sunday's not a work day for me. Sunday's a day of, I love doing this. Okay? I'm not at Woods. It's closed. Praise God. Can't get there. All right? I do things differently. Wear different clothes. I work hard to produce what I'm teaching you. It takes me 5 or 6 days to come up with these teachings. And that's why I'm up at 3:30 in the morning so I can be in my study and spend an hour and a half for the next 5 or 6 days working these things into a sermon. Man, come Sunday, I just got to teach it. This is the best part. They are paying me to do this. Are you serious? I'll do it for free. See, that's what John Maxwell said. He said, you want to have a great life? Find something you like to do and do it. And learn to do it and do it for free. But get so good at it, do it so well, people will pay you to do it. That's what my church does. They pay me to do what I would have done for free. Sometimes I have been teaching a class, especially in Baton Rouge. They asked me to come teach this class. I had to take off from work to go teach the class. I lost money in order to teach the class. That's when you know you're having fun. Okay? That's when you know you're rejoicing in God. So, does that answer your question, why Sunday's not a work day for me? Okay. Then I go home and I take a nap. I fall asleep to whatever I put in the DVD player. Then I wake up and I sometimes will take a second nap, and I'll get up from that nap and go to bed. Now, that's a Sabbath, baby. That's a day of rest, and rest again. All right. Now, the rest doesn't include when you're sitting here. Some of you have nodded off on me. Not today. It's usually after you've had, I can always tell who's new in the program because they're sleeping it off. They haven't slept in 3 days, so I get it. All right. Number 5, the Sabbath gives animals dignity. Now, I bet you didn't see that one coming. And I didn't either until I started to rest, until I started to do this, because even animals get a chance to rest 1 day a week. And as far as we know, as people have looked into this, it's the first national law in the history on behalf of animals. So, I just read it to you. What does it say? Everybody gets a day off, including your animals. See, you've heard of PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Before there was PETA, there was GETA. God for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Yeah. Why does this work? Because if we treat our animals fairly on the 1 day a week and we don't work them hard and we take care of them and we water them, you're going to have a little bit different attitude toward your animals come the first day of the week when you do work them. Oh, interesting. We're not going to abuse them. God created these animals. He called it good. We're going to treat them good. This is not something, of course, we think about when we read through the Ten Commandments, because in those days, animals weren't pets who lived in the house and got baths in the bathtub, and they ate table scraps, and they did tricks, and they slept in your bed. That's not happening, okay? They didn't have pets as social and emotional replacements for relationships. My cat is my emotional support. That's so sad that you don't have anybody in your life that can support you. You had to buy a kitty. I am making some folks mad. I am out on the edge. Well, I might as well just step off the end of it and just keep going. Boy, this lady brought in this dog in a carrying case yesterday to Woods, and the dog was in the case. And she got it out and brought it in and put it on a cart and bought something. And she wasn't in the store but like 4 minutes. And she wheeled that dog back out, put the dog back in the car, and I went, oh, Fido. When I come back, if I'm ever reincarnated, I want to come back as her dog. That dog had it made. But you hear this term, it says my emotional support animal. What have we become as a society that we can't support one another and we have to have a pet to do that? Now, I understand the joy of having pets. I had pets. They're fun. They're different. They're animals. We taught them tricks, But my life didn't revolve around my pet. It didn't go everywhere. Now you're seeing him in Walmart. Now I'm watching dogs defecate in Walmart. No, I don't think I'm hungry this week. It's good to have pets, and I know people that have pets. Like I said, I've had pets. But when we make them an emotional support because we don't have the support we need from people, or, as I'm going to get into it, and I'll get in trouble again on Sunday at my own church, Paul shares his struggles with the Philippians. And one of the things we need to do as a body of Christ is learn that it's okay to share your struggles. We get too proud to share I'm having trouble with this. And then we don't allow somebody else in to help meet the needs because we won't share them. Okay. At the same time, I also get it. There are people who have no family around or they're elderly, and the pets give them some enjoyment. I get that too. Okay, so I'm not against pets. But these people didn't have pets. But they also learned to treat them the dignity they are given as animals because God called them good. That's why it just bothers us when people mistreat their pets. Okay. Does it bother us the same way when people mistreat others? So the animals have rights. Now, the other interesting thing about the Ten Commandments is that it works for everybody. You don't have to be Jewish or Christian for this Sabbath to work for you. Right? Don't you think rest would help anybody? Okay. So you don't have to be Jewish or Christian. That's like saying gravity only works for Christians. Works for everybody. Right? Jesus said, oh yeah, the sun, it shines on the godly and the ungodly. That's right. You don't have to be a Christian to raise crops. There's a lot of atheist farmers. Sabbath would work for everybody. What's cool about it, though, is that those who believe the Ten Commandments were given by God are the ones who have kept the Sabbath alive because we understand its reason. We understand its purpose. We honor God. How do you honor God? You honor God by living the way he's created you to. Okay. I don't want to deviate from his plan. Okay. I don't want to harm my body. That's why you've come out of drugs. You're harming yourself. You're harming your relationship to God. So you clean that up so that you can live as God created your body to live. Get the amount of sleep, the right relationships, the way we were intended to. So just as faith in God brings people to the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath brings people to faith in God. Verse 11, I already read. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them, but on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart. Dennis Prager writes, every time you keep the Sabbath, you are affirming that there is a creator, that the world didn't just happen, that life isn't some meaningless coincidence, but that it is infinitely meaningful, and therefore each of us has a unique, significant purpose. You know, those aren't bad things for one day a week. So do you see why God wants us to keep one day different than the rest? People who have a Sabbath day, their lives tend to be happier. They tend to have better family lives. They're calmer. They tend to be more serene. They enjoy a wider community of friends. And they're even healthier. They've learned to take the day off. Really quickly, which of these 5 points surprised you the most? Animals. Okay. Abolishing slavery. I didn't either. I get it. Boy, until I got into this, see, I was doing a series on the book on the life of Moses, and then I got to this point, and I thought, well, we need to hang out here at the Ten Commandments. I don't want to skip over it. I was really glad we did. Learned a lot from that study. Celebrating a task well done. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like to think about Friday. I teach twice a week. I teach here and I teach my church on Sunday. And sometimes people will say, how did it go at Hannah's house? And I'm like, I think it went well. I always think it went well. Or I'll say, I had fun. Barbara's like, you always say that. I say, I have fun teaching. I love it. I'm in my element. It's good. How did they react? I had fun, though. I think the one that's hit me for the longest is the slavery one. Not abolishing it, but to remind us that we are not a slave to and don't need to be a slave to our fears or our job or anything else. Got to the point where you go to a job and they say, well, we need you to work Sunday. I'm sorry, I'll need to look for another job. Now, if you have to work Sunday, can you find another day, to take off? Well, I can't fellowship in a church. Yeah, but there's other times you can fellowship. There's nothing sacred about 11 to 12 on a Sunday. That became the first day of the week because Jesus rose from the dead on the first day of the week, not the seventh day. So that's why the early church took Sunday, which is the first day of the week. A lot of pastors, because of their duties, and it becomes kind of a job, will take Monday off, completely unscheduled. That's what Eugene Peterson did. After he was done everything he did on Sunday, him and his wife took off on Monday. They had nothing else going on. For years, Barbara and I had a Saturday if we didn't work around the house. That would be our day to take off to go to Bartlesville or do whatever we wanted to do. I usually had Friday off, and I would cook, and I would clean, and I'd take care of the house, and I'd mow the yard. Come Saturday, if we didn't want to do anything, we didn't have to. That became our time together to rest, because on Sunday, we're pulled in different directions for most of the day. So sometimes you can't always get that Sunday day of rest. Make another one. You're not here to serve the day, be it Sunday. The day's here to serve you. And it can only serve you when you allow it to. Father, thanks for this day. Thanks for reminding us to take some rest, to honor you in our rest, to do things differently, to shut things down, to change the direction of our conversation, to dress differently, to look back on our week and say, that was a good week. I'm satisfied. I'm going to take a breath and say, wow, thank you, Lord. And if there's nothing that was spectacular that happened this week that I can be overflowing with, how about I just think about you and everything you've done for us and how grateful we can be that we don't lack anything. And you completely surround us with your goodness and your love. And you continue to draw us more and more into an understanding of you. And that's when we sense more and more your presence in a way that we never have. So thank you for training us in righteousness and transforming us into the image of your Son. We thank you for this in your most amazing name. Amen.